Let's all get carried away to discuss the continued rise of romantasy and why it's a genre we love to come back to. Today on our panel, please welcome author Adalyn Grace, #1 New York Times and international best-selling author of Belladonna, All the Stars and Teeth, and the upcoming new series, The Wretched Divine. Prior to becoming an author, Adalyn worked in live theater and studied storytelling as an intern on Nickelodeon Animation's popular series, The Legend of Korra. Author Rachel Howzell Hall, the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of The Last Ones and upcoming The Cruel Dawn. This proud native of Los Angeles is also a two-time finalist of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Author Danielle L. Jensen, the New York Times bestselling author of A Fate Inked in Blood, as well as the USA Today bestselling author of The Bridge Kingdom, Dark Shores, and Malediction series. Her novels are published internationally in 21 languages. She lives in Calgary, Alberta, with her family and guinea pigs. Author Sunya Mara, who grew up in 6 different cities across 5 different states and now calls Los Angeles home. She studied film and business at the University of Southern California and went on to write and illustrate Oscar-winning Granity Studios. When not telling stories, she spends her time haunting old movie theaters and staring at museum walls. Author Alysha Rameera, a Sri Lankan and German-American author who writes about little-known historical figures, romance and magic, preferably all together. On non-writing days, you can find her baking at home or traveling the world with her husband. Her Soul for a Crown is her debut novel. Let's give a round of applause for our authors. Authors, may I please ask for a brief synopsis of your latest title or series, starting with Danielle?
Oh, just put me on the spot there. Can you hear me? I actually have 3 series finales coming out this year, so it's a really busy one. So, but my most recent release is A Curse Carved in Bone, which was the finale of the saga of the Unfated duology, which is about a shield maiden who is blessed with magic by the gods, but she gets wrapped into a rather unfortunate agreement with the leader of her area because he wants to be made king by her. Of course, he has a very handsome son who is assigned her bodyguard. It's very, very forbidden, but of course, sparks fly.
First, thank you all again for coming out at 9 o'clock on a Thursday. You could be doing other things, but this is the best thing to do. I am the author of The Last One, which is the first in the series. It's a story about a woman who wakes up in a crappy little forest outside of a crappy little town, and she doesn't know how she got there, what her name is, but she eventually discovers that she's there to save the realm, and this hot blacksmith will help her do that because hot blacksmiths are very helpful. And then The Cruel Dawn, which comes out on August 19th, is a continuation of Kai's story.
I love blacksmiths.
Yeah.
Oh, testing. Can you guys hear me? I just think I have to raise. I'm tall. Okay. I am Adalyn. I think we already said that. My book is Belladonna. This is the 3rd one in the series, so I'm not going to spoil it. I'll pitch the Belladonna series, which is a gothic-infused romantic mystery about a girl named Signa who can see spirits and who has to team up with Death himself, who's also hot, to solve a murder in an eerie gothic manner. If you like spooky Bridgerton with a paranormal murder mystery element, maybe you'll like the book.
Hi, I'm Sunya. Can you hear me? How's this? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sunya, and my latest book is called Embrace the Serpent. It's about a shy girl who crafts magical jewelry and the fearsome Serpent King who desperately needs her help, so much so that he sends his cleverest huntsman to track her down. And it's a kind of like a warm-hearted romantic fantasy like The Princess Bride or Howl's Moving Castle. So if you like those, give it a chance.
Hi, everyone. Am I eating it enough there? My debut novel, Her Soul for a Crown, is a slow burn romantasy. It's based off of Sri Lankan history and mythology, and it follows Anula, an actual historical person. She would like to end the reign of evil Rajas, and she is willing to do anything for that, including selling her soul to a cursed god known as the Blood Yaka Riri, who is also hot.
Common theme.
I agree, they're all hot. Romantasy has taken the literary world by storm, which I personally love. Why do you think readers are so drawn to the blend of fantasy and romance right now? Anyone?
I'll start.
Yeah, you start.
I think people read one to discover new lands, new people, new experiences, and love is a part of that. How it comes to be, how it ends, how it gets very, very complicated. And when you have that in a world where it starts out as ordinary, but then it twists, I think that's perfect. I mean, we're kind of living in a romantasy world right now, and I guess we're in the bad part of the romance.
Where's the hot blacksmith?
Exactly. Where's the hot blacksmith? But I think it's a panacea to what's happening in our lives right now.
Yeah, I think that romantasy really came out of the YA space because fantasy romance has been popular in young adult for so long, but you weren't really seeing until relatively recently a big surge of content that was being created for readers as they got older. They wanted older characters, they wanted maybe spicier content or, just more mature stories. And so I think it's a natural evolution of what was already existing in the YA space. As to why people like it, I think that in real life, we do not like drama in our relationships, but in fiction, we want... Why did I sense this about you? We want it in fiction because that's what makes it exciting. So if you add in the fantastical, you add in, saving kingdoms, the tension and the stakes is just so much higher. So it's romance times 10 as far as tension, stakes, and excitement. And I think that really appeals to a lot of readers.
I agree completely about the YA space in particular, and I think that the YA space was so heavily dominated by women, and then it's just like a natural progression moving into adult fantasy as we age too. As I started thinking I was only ever going to write YA because that's what I loved as a reader, but then you age up, the category starts to adapt, and I'm not gonna hate on any male authors. I love Brandon Sanderson. Dungeon Crawler Carl's one of my favorite books right now. But it was the fantasy adult space was so heavily dominated by men that I feel like as, the YA readers, writers kind of aged up, there was just that natural progression. And now it's very heavily dominated by women, which is really interesting and cool to see. But it is kind of weird to me that we had to have a whole new genre invented, just because we infiltrated that space.
They don't want us.
Yeah, they
It's
don't
their
want us.
loss.
Yeah, and I also think fantasy across the board is usually about transformation, either of the main character or the world, but so are love stories. You usually have to become your best self to really form a lasting love. So I think it's actually a very natural combination of these two genres because really it's about becoming more yourself and creating a more beautiful world. And I think, I don't know, there's something that feels like even Lord of the Rings ends in a wedding.
I agree with everything that has been said, and I would add, at least for me as a romantasy reader, I find it very hopeful. Fantasy has always been an escape for me in that hopefully by the end of a series or end of the book, good has triumphed over evil. And in romance, there's usually the HEA, the happily ever after, and especially if we look at when romantasy became a genre, I guess, or became really popular, bad things were starting to happen, or we were in the middle of bad things, and we just kind of needed the hope of everything's gonna be okay because that's how it works.
I feel like it's nice to see romantic partners from a women's perspective too. I feel like they're written very differently, and I feel like that is a big part of why this genre is like so successful and so loved, because we write them a little different.
Agreed.
A little nicer. Yeah. A little more accurate.
Well, more accurate, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not ignoring the bad parts, nor are you sensationalizing those bad parts. It just is. This is how like real people love each other, and I think we do bring that kind of, I'm not looking at myself breasting boobily across the, because women don't do that. So bringing that kind of perspective, I think, especially women readers are like, I can see myself in her.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so much of what we consume in the world is catered to the male gaze, and romantasy is very much catered to the female gaze, and that is something that a lot of people are really drawn to. And so it's been nice to see the rise of that, where what women desire is given the same, bandwidth as what men desire.
Going off that, romantasy demands both emotional depth and immersive world building. How do you balance romance and magic in your series or stories? Rachel, for example, the last one takes place in a remote setting with high psychological stakes. How did you approach writing isolation and tension so effectively?
So in my other life, I write mystery and thrillers, and that's a very hard, real world. But even in something like that, me writing stories about Los Angeles, there are pockets that may have lots of buildings, but are empty or abandoned or kind of just left to do what it has to do. So my big challenge when writing the last one was create a world where, one, it came from my head. And I kind of rebuked that for a very long time, because it's like, what do you mean I need to create my own world? Like, it's fantasy, you have to do that. So I simply, thought about even just parts of Los Angeles, like what would happen if everything was just wiped away and it was dying. And I started from there. I wanted a world where people weren't doing well, were sick and very closed off. And here comes this woman, Kai. I always call her like the Tippi Hedren of my story, where, in the birds, Tippi Hedren just goes in and the birds just like freak out. She's doing that. Kai is probably the prettiest thing that has ever been in this town, but she's wrong somehow. It's like that Twilight Zone where the pig people were actually the pretty people, and you remember that episode. And I wanted that, where these awful people in this dying land that has suffered because of all the bad things they've done to it and to each other, immediately wants to kick her out or shun her because she is ordered in this disordered land. So it's simply like taking a place that used to be beautiful and sprawling, and what we do to that beautiful place. I was just saying, back in the day, it would take an hour and a half just to get from LA to San Diego, and there'd just be land everywhere. And now it took me 4 hours, and there is no like free space. Right. So I think about those things, even when just driving, of how the space, how the people, how everything changes just in time.
What comes first for you authors, the love story or the fantasy concept? And how do you make them serve each other in your stories?
Why are you all looking at me?
We're all trying to be polite.
For me, it's the inciting event that tends to come first. So what is the thing that kicks off the story? So that is usually where my idea springs from, but sometimes it comes from specific inspirations in the real world. So Saga of the Unfated was very much inspired by the original Vikings television show. So I knew that I wanted to write a Lagatha-esque character, and it came from there. So in that series, it was very much character driven, but it really depends. I think that for me, my books they're like children. Even though they're all coming from me, they're all their own personality and they're different, and I can't just sort of nicely sum them up as this is the way that I always do it, because it's not. I wish there was a way that I always did it. I would be more efficient, but alas. I have a multitude of difficult children.
I feel like I always know like the general archetype of like characters that I want, but they're kind of like shadowy in my brain, and I don't fully know their form yet because I'm always very much like world first. I don't really, like, it's funny, I don't know, and maybe somebody here can answer this for me. I don't really consider myself like a romantasy writer because I feel like I write fantasy that has romance in it, and I don't know what differentiates the two categories. Because I always think of like world first and think of the magic system. How does the magic influence the world, the jobs, what the characters are eating, what they're wearing, all of those things. And then the characters, like they have to be interesting enough to like slot into that world and be interesting enough to also take the focus from a really cool world. I always think of that first, and then the romance builds up naturally. But yeah, world first for sure for me.
It's hard to know what the romance is going to be like until you know who the people are. You know, it does matter who the people are.
Yeah,
the kind of romance.
I'll know like, oh, I want a character who, like I'm working on an angel demon knight book right now. And it's like, okay, I know I have an angel, I know I have a demon, find their personality, and they're going to do this. But then it's a lot of like editing and building and figuring them out.
It's not friends to lovers, is it?
No. It's not friends to lovers.
For me, I think I'm the same as Danielle. It changes with every book. But for Embrace the Serpent, it was a moment where I'd been thinking about jewelry because I'd just gotten married, and that, like, for some reason when you get married, suddenly, like, all the ads you see change. It's all about wedding rings. And it's like, oh, somehow love means you buy a shiny rock. Like, that is how the world works. So I was thinking about that, and I was in my little writing room, which is in my backyard, and I looked out the window, and it was like 9 feet long. It was a California king snake, and it was just like slithering along, and like this primal horror went through me. Like, I've never been more terrified in my life, and it couldn't get to me. I was inside a building, and the thought that came into my head was like, what would it take for me to love that snake?
First thought.
How do I kill that snake?
How do I run away?
Yeah.
Well, I was like, why am I so horrified? Like, it cannot hurt me, and king snakes eat rattlesnakes, so I should be like on that snake's side, but I wasn't. So, and from then I was like, okay, that sparked characters and then romance, and yeah.
The ideas we think of.
For me, it is usually character first, but that's because I write a lot of historical fantasy. So Anua in my debut is a historical figure, and she only had like 2 lines in the history book, which was that she poisoned 6 husbands to get to the throne. And I was like, well,
Ooh.
there's the story. And then the Blood Yaka Riri is from Sri Lankan mythology, from demonology. So I basically knew what she was going to be doing. And I think he came to me more of just like, the mythology was just so interesting that I couldn't not put that into the world as well. And then I had a lot of fun creating a world in which they would then meet and have to use each other.
Are there any rules, magic or otherwise, that you've set for your world that directly affect the way that your romance plays out? Are there any rules, magic or otherwise, that you've set for your world that directly affect the way your romance plays out? For example, Danielle, your world borrows from Norse mythology. Gods, Drog, Jotuns, but the concept of demigods and blood magic feels fresh. How did you strike the balance between myth and originality?
Well, the really fun thing about Norse mythology is they had a oral tradition. They were not like the Greeks who wrote everything down. They were communicating all of their stories down through song, through poetry, and it wasn't until kind of Christianity arrived that they started to write these down. And a lot of what is written down it's altered by Christian belief. So there's gods where they're only mentioned once, and we're not really sure if they're just the alter ego of another god. There's just so much uncertainty and gaps in stories. So there are certain stories that you can draw upon, but there's just so much, well, it could be this or it could be that. It never feels that, cut and dry as the way it does with other types of mythology. And I think that gives you a lot of space to create within what exists. And that's what I was really trying to do, is to look at the stories that I felt seemed like they were genuine and true, and to carve my own path around them and through them and create it. As far as how the magic influences the romance, the types of magic that I chose for the characters was very reflective of their personalities. So it is a reflection of them, and therefore it has to impact the romance because it is one and the same. And so that's the way I like to do it, is I want the magic to be very much a part of the character. So it is hard to think of them ever as separate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, it was everything you're saying. Like, to write this book, I pulled upon every mythology that I've ever learned about in the history of me. And because everything kind of informs everything. Who gets to be the star of the God cosmos, who gets to write the history. So there's that. But I wanted to create in this story of a woman who is or was powerful, rediscovering who she is. And my stories always start character first, because I think about women going into spaces where they're not welcomed, or where they're questioned, or where they're not trusted. And that's Kai. And if she can't remember herself, no matter how powerful she was in her prior life, she can't do those things that she used to be able to do, because that's not her anymore. And so I am a gamer, and I was thinking about, as I was writing this, I was playing Elden Ring, which I gave up on because that was just too doggone hard. But Elden Ring, The Witcher 3, and Fallout 4, which I've played like 38,000 times. And when you play those games, you start out with the crappy twig, and then you get the worse off kind of nasty sword, and then you get powerful and more powerful. And I was thinking about this as a game when it came to the magic system. Kai doesn't remember that she was once powerful. Oops, spoiler alert. But because of that, she can't just immediately start hurling this and this and this. As she discovers herself, her magic increases, and she gets to be as powerful as she is allowed to be, because she is still diminished in many ways. So, it was, my systems are really based on power and how weak you are and how much you learn and grow and develop. And as you're growing, you get rewarded with bigger things, bigger gifts.
I think the magic that influenced my story the most is the fact that death is a love interest, and if you touch him, you die. So that was a really fun angle to play with, trying to figure out how to make these characters in a romantic relationship. Also, because he can't interact with everybody and people can't see him, he's really lonely. And then there's this girl who can see spirits, and she's been alone all her life and feels very misunderstood, and she is also lonely. So it's, the magic is also informing who the characters are and kind of what they're seeking out. And they're less lonely together, and they have to figure out how to touch without dying.
Yeah, my story has magical jewelry, and the main character, her name is Saphira. That is what she does for a living. She crafts jewels, and I borrowed from the real world, which we've been crafting jewels for like several thousands of years. Like, it is something universal. And the interesting thing is that we're still discovering new ways to cut jewels to bring out more parts of their sparkle, or like more of like their fire, the rainbow. And that was really interesting to me, that the geometry of how to cut a gemstone is an art form. You can do it any way you want. You can, and each time you're kind of revealing something new about this stone. And I was like, okay, so that if every stone has a magical power, and the way you cut it changes how that can be harnessed, then you would need to be quite like the expert craftsperson to harness it in every way possible. And that kind of sparked this character, and she is a little bit like, she's a little weird, she's a bit of a recluse, like she doesn't really like to be perceived by anybody, and she spends all her time doing this. And so when the Serpent King's huntsman comes into her life, and he's a very charismatic sort of person with kind of has magic that follows a very different set of rules, then I wanted them to kind of, their magic shows, like Rachel was saying, who they are, and as they understand each other's magic, they also understand each other better.
It's a really cool magic system. It was one of my most recent reads. It's very cool.
Yeah, for my magic system, I played with the mythology of the Yakas, but then I also like expanded more to give the Yakas like a counterbalance, who I call like divinities, and they have given blessed gifts to certain people of the kingdom, and there are certain blessed gifts that know things and can say things, and they constantly comment on Anula and Riri's tension. And then when Anula and Riri do end up meeting and kind of their storylines come together, there's a tether that may or may not be part of the romance that puts them together constantly. I wanted a way to like kind of force them together, because Anula is very driven and purposeful, and she's got no time for anyone else except for her plan, and her plan is to rid the kingdom of evil people. So when Riri is like, well, I have my own plan, and I was like, well, how are they going to get together? So a lot of the stories that I was reading about, like Yakas and the mythologies, they've been around for so long that there are a lot of folk tales about them that change a little bit of what they were doing. So I kind of had a lot of fun of like, what else can they be doing, or how can I use their magic to bring out the romance, is kind of how I was looking at it from the get-go, was magic kind of being like the fairy godmother of like, and now you kiss.
Speaking of, how do you write scenes of tension and emotional vulnerability? What's your approach to keeping them grounded and powerful, and also hot?
I think this is where writers, our biggest strength is. I mean, we are vampires. We are constantly looking at y'all and seeing how you talk to each other, how you don't say things you want to say, or say them in like passive aggressive ways, or, you know, so I am a student of people. And when I see an interesting interaction, I actually write it down in I keep an Evernote file of like real life scenes. And
Do you have like tea on everyone that you know?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I kept diaries from 3rd grade all the way up to 2nd year out of college. So I really do study people. I may not like them a lot, but I do study them. But I think that's the first step, is seeing how real people interact with each other. And it's always a question of looking at your own life to see that you are actually more interesting than what you think. suspense is everywhere. What am I going to wear? Am I going to get in this line and actually get to the place where what is the traffic going to be? And I think when I'm coming to something like a book, I think about who Kai is and how she's being perceived and what is that person going to say to me, and will I end up there's a snake in this book. Am I going to kill it, or is it a friend? It's always looking at a scene and wondering what's the worst thing can happen and playing on that until the worst thing actually wasn't that snake, it's the people who are more evil than the snake. So yeah, writers, we mine all the interactions around us to look at real life suspense.
I love your answers. I also think, like, you have to consider what's happening in the story at the time too, and all of that is going to feed into how the characters interact. Like, did they just get out of this very tense moment where they thought that they were going to get caught, and then they didn't get caught, and they're just being fueled by adrenaline, and then maybe they kiss, and then maybe that kiss is really great because they're fueled by adrenaline. I think it's just a matter of what is happening and how does that, is it stress? Are they getting angry? Is one of your characters, like, their trigger points? Did somebody touch that? And then they're going to react. So it's just what is happening? How does it all kind of come together into that moment?
I absolutely love that. I like making the characters hit each other's trigger points or like pinch them a little bit in their wounds. And then I find my favorite banter is when they're like angrily talking to each other because they've been pinched or something, but then that later in the story leads to like healing, because when your triggers or when you're constantly triggered, hopefully we can make that lead into like a healing point. But I love getting my characters in situations where they're like poking each other, and maybe even like triggering things that the main character didn't know was like a trigger, and fun conversations.
Yeah, I agree with everything. And I also, in film school, one of the things that they teach us, and that stuck with me, is that a scene between two characters should always be either a seduction, a negotiation, or a fight. And that, if you stick to those rules, then you're not putting in like scenes that are kind of cute, but they don't move things forward. And that's one of those things I think about a lot.
Yeah, when you're writing a romance novel or a novel that has a strong romantic element to it, you have to have a plot to your romance. It's not just two people hanging out together and nothing happens, because that's boring. You need to have conflict. You need to have a goal within the relationship. And so there needs to be an arc. And so you are crafting, in a lot of ways, the relationship arc in the same way that you're crafting any type of plot arc. There needs to be, what is the conflict? How are you escalating it? How are you going to try and resolve it, and probably have some pitfalls? And, then you want to have the resolution of, a happily ever after or a happily for now in a romance novel. And so I am always looking at crafting the tension the same way that I do for romance as I do for my other arcs, is that I want it to be rising to the climax, and and then have the denouement where with the happily ever after.
And I know when I'm creating my characters, I do give them horoscopes and the Brigg-Myers thing, because a Virgo loves different than a Taurus, or a Scorpio hates everything. It's like, so putting, the kind of archetypes together is just a natural kind of like I'll pick on my husband right now. He drinks milk, and sometimes he will leave the cups of milk with a little bit of milk at the bottom, which means you have to soak no, it's not it's just, the film, that milk, it's nothing nefarious. But for me, it's like I see the cup like a woman does, and it's like, oh, I have to soak the thing, right? Now, am I going to go off, or am I going to be cool? That's suspense. right? I mean, every time you go to like Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas or whatever, you're hoping that Uncle so-and-so doesn't say that thing that's gonna set all of it off.
Yeah.
Because that happens, and that's why, it's suspense is kind of easy because it's everywhere. That baby. It's like, is she gonna get up? Is the baby gonna be cool?
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Do you ever write a pairing, whether it's romantic, scene, a friendship pairing, thinking it'll go one way only to discover a totally different chemistry between them?
Always. Yeah.
And
I've
how do
never
you
correctly
adjust your
predicted.
story towards it?
I tend to just roll with it and see, because it's usually because, for me, I'm becoming more aware of who my characters are, and the better that I know them, it does change how the trajectory of their romance. And so I've found that it just requires me to be flexible and let them plot their own romance to a certain extent. But there's going to be people, I think, who are hardcore plotters that don't do that.
I am a hardcore plotter, but like no matter how much you plot it, you always get screwed over. There is a character, I'm going to try not to spoil too much. There's a character named Eris who's introduced in the second book, Foxglove, in the series. And my original idea for him was he was like a Klaus Mikkelsen meets Hal Pendragon, like this very dark and naughty, but like a little fun and quirky. And he was always supposed to be like a very villainous character. And then as soon as he came on the page, I was like, oh, you're actually really hot and really fun. So I have to figure this out now. And I won't go too into detail about that. But he was never supposed to be like a super love interest. But as soon as I started writing him, he immediately became like my favorite character in the whole series.
Okay, last two questions for me before we open up to questions from you all. What is next for each of you that you can talk about? And then also, where can our readers find you on social media?
Sure. I have a companion novel coming out next year. So same world, different characters, except for one of the side characters in here gets to be the main character. His name's Sohan, and he was my favorite of the Akkas that he was just going to be he is just a side character in here. But I loved him so much that I was like, well, I'm going to write his story next. I don't care what anyone says. And then you can find me on Instagram at Alysha's Books. At Alysha's Books, yes, that's the handle.
I don't have anything I can talk about yet. So Embrace the Serpent is the one. And you can find me at Sunya Mara on TikTok or Instagram.
I have Holly coming out September 30th. We're going to be doing something really fun in San Diego that I'm not allowed to announce yet, but it's really fun. That one is an illustrated novella. It's like a holiday novella for this series, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's art by Lotus Bubble. And then I'm working on my first adult fantasy. It's called The Wretched Divine. It's like a medieval knight with an angel and a demon and lots of magic. And I don't know that I'm allowed to talk too much about it yet, but the cover's so cool. So soon.
The Cruel Dawn comes out August 19th, and it's a continuation of a story, especially, with Kai not remembering who she is and falling for this hot blacksmith. What happens when you start to remember that I had a life and maybe somebody else in my old life? Yeah. Drama. You can find me at www.rachelhowzell.com and on Instagram at r.howzell Hall.
Oh, I have a lot happening, actually. I have the last book in my Dark Shores series coming out August 5th, which I'm really excited about. That's my YA fantasy. I have finished writing the last Bridge Kingdom book, which I imagine a few of you might be interested in reading. So it is done. It is done. And so I'm hoping that we will be announcing dates and covers relatively soon. I also have a new book in the works that we will be starting to talk about that I can't say too much about, but it is a brand new fantasy romance with all new characters, and I'm very, very excited about it. So as to where to find me, I am Danielle L. Jensen on everything except for TikTok, because when I created Danielle L. Jensen, I lost the password, and so it is Danielle Lynn Jensen on TikTok. But also I am Danielle L. Jensen, wherever that account went.
Anyone have any questions for our authors? I'm just going to keep talking. Yes.
Curious what tropes you like reading versus writing.
Ooh. I love a reincarnation trope, but I like reading and writing it. But there's actually nothing I love more, and you can boo if you want, whatever, than a love triangle. That is my favorite trope to read in the whole world.
I love love triangles.
But
they
get
good
so
ones.
much. Yeah.
Good ones.
Well, there's
Yeah.
nothing that like keeps you turning the page faster than that angst and like what's gonna happen, who's it gonna be? Which, I mean, they're both great, but there's one who's obviously better.
On a certain given day. I do like love triangles. I also like amnesia, because those two things, like what the books I'm writing now, it's like, well, what does happen when you can't remember who you actually loved and what you loved about that person? And then there's this other hot guy over there. What do you do?
Yeah, I also love amnesia, but when you remember the wrong things about your past life. Yeah, and you're convinced you're this person when you're not.
That's cool.
I really love romances that incorporate time travel, but I would never write one because I'm pretty sure it would break my brain. But I love reading them when they're done well. Love time travel.
I also love time travel, and I have tried writing, or I have written a time travel book, and it did break my brain, and it is not my debut. So I really love Only One Bed.
Yeah.
Or anything associated with it. Only One Bed is in this one, and then I have possibly Only One Hammock in the second book.
I'm not an author, but I love secret royals.
Ooh, yeah.
Yes.
This isn't my question. Adalyn, where can we find you online?
Yeah, I forgot to answer that. Author Adalyn Grace, I think, on Instagram. I have a website. It's pretty updated, but most updates are on my Instagram. Thank you.
So my actual question is for Rachel, but anybody can answer this. I know this is a book panel. You started speaking my language when you said video games. Do you have a favorite video game romance?
Romance.
Like a favorite love story and a romance in a video game. I know it's kind of hard sometimes because not all video games have romance.
Right, and the ones.
Like Jennifer or Triss.
Love triangle.
I love Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer and Earl. Yeah. Because then it's like, for that, it's like, you make your own character, and it's like, I don't think there was a love story in Fallout, but thank you for Jennifer. Yeah, definitely Jennifer. Thank you. Anybody else?
Also Jennifer.
All the Final Fantasies, especially the old ones. Yeah. Yuna, Tifa.
Yeah. Oh, Tifa over Aerith.
Well,
Yes. And 4, I was the watchman, not the watchman, but he wears the hat and he sends you to the. Yes, I liked him. He was very efficient.
Did you still want to ask? Okay. Yes. Yes, you agreed.
How much, I know you said you kept diaries and everything since you were very young. How much of yourselves do you put into any of your female main characters or male main characters? And how much of your own ideas, relationships, fantasies do you put into your writing and your books and your characters?
Have done characters where I've put a lot in, but the problem is that I find that those are the characteristics that the readers really trash. And then I feel really bad about it. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna continue. I think that you inherently must, because they are part of you. But I don't know, for the sake of my sanity, I might need to start just not putting maybe necessarily. It feels like I'm stealing from my craft if I don't put myself in it, but it is harsh when you have injected something that you would specifically do in a way that you are, and then readers are like, she's so stupid. And it's so personal, so I don't know. I mean, I think I'll probably keep doing it and just like weep in the corner when people criticize it, but yeah, so sometimes yes, and I weep.
That made me sad. Well, because we do that. Books are so very, even though they're commercial and we're selling them, these are very real things to us, and we do turn to the easiest model, which is, us. And I do put a lot of myself in there, and it's mostly because, I'm sending women into spaces where they are not welcome or where they are an irritant. So I do that a lot. I am very sure to, make it so it's difficult for her and the people around, because that's where suspense comes. That's where the triggers and you said seduction, negotiation, and violence, or whatever.
Arguments.
Yeah, that's where it all comes from, and it's how I go about the world every day.
Yeah, it's not something I actively think about, but then I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, like that character definitely has pieces of me. I think for Signa, she feels like if she behaves a certain way, she's going to be accepted by people, and it's a way outside of her comfort zone. And I think a lot of, women, especially growing up, you're told to behave a certain way, and that's what's going to be accepted. And she definitely is dealing with that. And after I wrote her character, I was like, oh, I guess I had that trauma. And then I think Eris, actually, I had no idea until after I wrote him. His personality, he's got like a very dry, snarky humor, and I was like, oh, that's me. That is my humor. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's because, like Danielle was saying, when we write it, it has to be something we know, so necessarily some part of ourselves comes in. But I also write people I'm curious about. So I guess that means it's not something that I'm necessarily embodying, but it is my curiosity that's crafting them. And for Saphira particularly, I remember when I was younger, I loved painting. And my fantasy was that I could just be locked in a room with beautiful windows and just paint all day, and no one would ever talk to me. And so I was like, and I grew out of that, but I was like, what if this is a character who's starting from that place and just got to stay there? Who would they become?
We have time for one more quick question. Yes?
We love a trope in a romance novel, but how do you kind of balance either breaking a trope or ooh, I think I maybe put too many in there?
I don't put them in. I don't. I think that you have to. I don't know. I don't write for the trope. The trope fits the plot and the situation that I've put my characters in. So any trope that I use or subvert is going to have been driven by where the trajectory of the plot and the character arcs and whatnot goes. I don't say, I'm going to write this novel and it's going to be enemies to lovers, there's going to be only one horse, only one bed, they're going to have to cuddle for warmth, there's only going to be one cabin and one attic. I don't make that laundry list.
Hashtags come after.
Yeah, so it's more organic than that for me. But I've never once looked at a book and said, I've put in too many tropes, but maybe other people are like, oh, she's just so tropey. And I just am not self-aware enough, I don't know. But I do make it organic.
Yeah, I think I start with the book, and then you learn what tropes apply to it. That's how I learned, silver-haired love interest is a hashtag. And I was like, oh. And that was, the book is done, it's printed. So I think sometimes it goes the other way.
Yeah, I think for Rehearsal for Crown, I did know it was going to be enemies to lovers because I love them. But as I was plotting, I just found, I guess it was more organic, where I found where certain places where I was like, oh, I can have them just have one bed, even though we're in a palace and you could probably ask for another bed. So that's where the magic came in, to make it to where, like, even if you could ask, you can't have one. But yeah, more organic. And then for this one, I just went all out and put all my favorite tropes in, and then I left it up to my agent to tell me whether or not there were too many, and she did not, so.
I think tropes get like a bad reputation unnecessarily, but to us, I mean, at least for me, a lot of times they're kind of like the candy in the scene that keeps me going. It's like, what do I love to read and to write? Let me put some of that in to get me through what's otherwise a really hard draft to write. And then a lot of times I'm very cocky by nature and competitive. So I'm like, oh, you think you don't love triangles? Okay, well, let me do one anyway and like try to make you love it. So that like is what fuels me personally.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, and thank you, Michelle.
So don't forget, you can see our authors on the post-panel signing starting at 11:30 in autograph area table 9. Thank you and happy con.